Hi everyone, my name is Lauren, and today I'm going to be talking about backyard invasive species and how to dispose and compost of them. So again, my name is Lauren Mercier. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Capital Region Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. Here's my contact information and our website. If you have any questions or need more information, I will also provide this at the end for you in case you didn't have a chance to write it down right now. So what are invasive species? Invasive species are any non-native species that has the potential to cause harm to the environment, the economy, or human health. So non-native can be from either a different country or just a different ecosystem. So for example, a species from the southern United States can move north to the northern United States outside of its native range. So invasive species impact a lot of different aspects of our daily lives. They can cause habitat degradation, the loss of biodiversity, they can spread diseases, they can decrease recreational opportunities, and impact livestock and agriculture. These are just a few of the impacts that they can have on our daily lives. There are many, many more, but these are some of the big ones. So how do they get here? There's a couple of different ways that invasive species get introduced into a novel ecosystem. The most well-known is international trade. So there's intentional and unintentional introductions. Intentional would be like the aquarium trade or exotic pet trade or ornamental plant trade. So these are a couple ways that invasive species have spread to the United States and other countries because people think that these plants and animals are really cool to look at and they want to have them in their own backyards, yet they don't understand some of the negative implications of doing that. There's also the unintentional introduction, so that would be hitchhikers coming on shipping crates or airplanes, things like that, but it's unintentional. People don't know that it's happening. Another way is climate change. So like I said before, if something in the southern United States starts to creep its way up because the climate is warming, that's an example of an invasive species. And then once they're in the novel ecosystem, they can spread by landscaping, by birds and wildlife, weather events such as flooding or tornadoes or something like that. Transportation is a big one, so cars, trains, bikes, people's hiking boots. There's all different ways that they can transfer to different areas, so we want to keep an eye out for that. Now that you have a little bit of background, I'll give you an overview of what the PRISM does. The PRISM is the Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management, and they're spread throughout the state. So right here, we're in the Capital Region, and we cover 11 counties. But there are 7 other PRISMs throughout the state, and they all have the same basic principles that we abide by in order to achieve our goals for invasive species management. So first, we coordinate partner efforts. So we have a network of partners that we utilize on a daily basis to deliver education materials, host events, do projects, all different things. So our partners and our volunteers are really important to us and the role of the PRISM. We also identify and deliver education and outreach to the public. We establish early identification and detection throughout the PRISM, and then we monitor those populations to make sure they aren't spreading. We also can implement eradication and control efforts in order to prevent the spread into new areas. We can also award funding to partners and people who are doing invasive species management throughout the area, and that would be through our RFP or request for proposal process. So the picture is one of our events that we did with Saratoga Plan. It was a water chestnut pull in Fish Creek. So this is just an example of the different partners that we have and the different things that we do. So we do lots of events like that throughout the year. So once an invasive species is on our radar, we can do a couple of different things depending on if there is a population, and how widespread the population is. So our first priority is prevention. We'll get into that a little bit more and what that means. And then if we can't prevent it, then we go to removal and control. Once we remove and control a population, we have to dispose of it to make sure it doesn't come back. And then once we do that, we can monitor it for a number of years to make sure that our efforts were successful. So prevention involves a couple different things. Primarily it's education and outreach. So we use our partners and in-house, and we do tabling events, we host webinars like this, we do woods walks, we do all different sorts of things to increase awareness and get people out in their environments and aware of the potential invasive species that might surround them. We also encourage people to clean their equipment and their clothing when they go hiking or when they go in a body of water. We have boat stewards who check boats during the summer for aquatic invasive species and make sure that they aren't spreading them to new lakes or other water bodies. We also encourage people to buy native plants and to not transport firewood or plant fragments or seeds in order to prevent the spread of invasive species. So if we can't prevent them and they've already established in our area, we can do removal and control efforts in order to prevent their spread into other areas in our PRISM. So first would be manual and mechanical removal. So this would involve pulling or digging, cutting, mowing, excavating, depending on how big the population is and the plant or animal that you are dealing with. These methods are commonly used for plants, so now on I'm going to be referring to plants. So all of those methods are very cost effective and are commonly used as a first step for invasive species management. If those methods don't work, then we can transfer to some other methods like chemical treatments. So there's a couple of different ways that we can do that. There's the cut stump method, which means you would cut the stem horizontally and then brush the chemical on the open stump. And then there's stem injection. So if there's a hollow plant or a hollow stem, we can inject the stem with the herbicide and it will go down into the roots and do its job. There's also foliar spray, which means you spray the leaves. And then there's hack and squirt. So rather than cutting down the whole tree, you can make little notches in it and squirt the herbicide into the trunk or stem. There's also biological control that we can use. It requires a lot of time and effort and money in order for a biological control to be released into the environment. So once a plant is removed, there's a couple of techniques that we use for disposal. There's solarization, there's excavating. You can make a brush pile, you can chip and compost, or you can burn. We'll go into detail of these techniques. And depending on your plant, you can use a variety of these different methods. You can use them in combination, or some plants are better off using just one. So solarization, there's two different types of solarization. There's on-site and off-site, and both involve using the sun's rays to basically heat up the plant material and cause it to die off. So on-site would mean you are leaving the plant as is. You can cut it or mow it, but leave it there, and then you place either a clear or a dark plastic tarp over the entire population. It's best for monocultures if you're doing it this way, so you're not harming other plants that might be in the area. So you lay this tarp over it, make sure that it's held down really well so nothing can get under it and that the wind won't blow it away. And you leave it there for 4 to 6 weeks and allow the sun to do its job and cause the plant to start to decompose. This is best for plants that do not use rhizomes or fragmentation for reproduction because they can spread horizontally and cause new populations outside of the tarped area if you're not careful. So it's best to know your plant before you do this. So there's information on specific plants on our website that you can look up if you're concerned about a specific plant. Offsite is very similar. So rather than leaving the material in place, you can cut it and remove it, place it in dark commercial grade plastic bags, so like a garbage bag, and then carry those offsite to ideally a pavement, like an area of pavement, or put it on some wood slabs, something like that to get it raised up off the ground and allow for the sun to do its thing, and the material will decompose in 4 to 6 weeks. Then you can dispose of the bags in a sanitary landfill. All right, sorry about that. So these are some pictures of solarization, both on-site and off-site. So on the left is on-site, and on the right would be off-site. Next, we have excavating. So you can dig up the plant material, and then once it's dug up from the ground, you can dig a big hole, so about 3 feet deep, and then line that hole with a thick plastic. Then you can place the removed material into the hole, cover it with plastic before filling it with dirt, and that should kill off the plant and prevent it from resprouting. So again, this is best for plants that do not reproduce through fragmentation or rhizomes, as the excavating can cause fragmentation and eventually spread and cause new populations rather than dealing with the population. So you can also make a brush pile from removed material. If you cut a plant, you can leave it on site if it's not in fruit or if it doesn't reproduce by fragmentation, and allow the roots to dry. And then this will create habitat for birds and small mammals. But since it does create habitat for small mammals, it can introduce pests like mice, and sometimes mice carry ticks. So it's important to do this away from your home or away from a trail where there's going to be a lot of people going back and forth so that we don't increase the spread of ticks. Chipping and composting is another method of disposal. However, it must be done with great care. So dry and woody material can be chipped as long as it, again, doesn't reproduce by fragmentation or isn't in seed. So you can chip the wood or plant material and then use that for compost. It's best to avoid composting fresh material or plants that are in seed or reproduced by fragmentation because you can just create more of a problem for yourself rather than solving the problem. It's also important not to distribute your compost with other people because you could introduce the invasive species into new areas, which will not make you friends. It will make enemies. People don't want invasives in their backyards as much as you don't want them in your backyards. So it's important to keep your compost to yourself so that you reduce the risk of spreading. An example of this, unfortunately, has been Asian jumping worms. It's been spread in mulch and gravel that's been sold by some retailers. So it's really important to be aware of the sterilization techniques that should be used and not to spread your own materials with other people. So again, there's an increased risk of spreading the plant if you are composting. You need to make sure that the material is contained and heated to a proper temperature in order to reduce those risks. You should also avoid buying worm composting kits, as the jumping worm could be in those kits, because it's kind of hard to identify different worms when they're very young. Lastly, there's controlled burning. Please refer to local, state, and federal laws before conducting a controlled burn. There are lots of regulations, and you need to know the correct temperatures and humidity and wind, and there's a lot of different factors that play into controlled burning. So please check out your local laws and regulations before conducting a burn. Fire permits may also need to be obtained by from your local clerk. So please look into that before burning. But burning is best for monocultures. So if there is a big patch of one specific invasive species that you're concerned with, and there are no other plants in there, it's a good method of completely controlling one large population. Less dense sites require manual removal first, then you create a brush pile from that material, and then you can burn that brush pile. It's important not to move any material that you remove more than 50 miles away from its original location. This applies mostly to firewood, so if you were cutting down an invasive tree such as Norway maple or black locust and wanted to use that for firewood, it's important not to move that more than 50 miles. The same thing goes for native trees, because native trees can have invasive pests in them. So don't move firewood more than 50 miles away to reduce the risk of spreading pests and invasive species. Controlled burning is effective before, during, and after flowering, which a lot of the other methods are best to do before flowering, or going into seed. So this is a method that can be used if you missed that window. But again, make sure you check your local regulations before burning. So after a plant is removed and disposed of properly, it's really important to monitor the area that you conducted this management. So there's an app called IMAP Invasives. It's a very useful tool for monitoring the spread of invasive species, and you can also monitor your progress in management. Record how much you removed, and then over time you will be able to see a numerical difference in the acreage or the size of the plot that you removed. So these methods, or these records, can be put into IMAP Invasives. You can take before and after photos, visually represent the change over time, and then it's really important to return to the site annually for at least 5 years in order to make sure that your efforts are working and to remove any species or any individuals that might be popping back up that you didn't get the first time or the second time. So we're going to talk about some common backyard invasive species. and the correct removal and disposal methods for those species. First is Oriental Bittersweet. It's a woody vine that grows in forests. It can actually grow on homes, anything that's sturdy. When it's young, the stem is green, and then as it gets older, it turns brown and has these lenticels on it, and there are little like notches, and it's a bark material. The leaves are alternate on the stem. They are glossy, finely toothed, and are round when they're young, and then transform into more egg-shaped as they get older. In the midsummer, they have these bright yellow capsules that form in these clusters, as you can see in the photo. And then those clusters burst open in the fall to reveal these red berries, which are then eaten by birds and spread the plant. The seeds or the fruit that aren't eaten can overwinter and provide food for birds throughout the winter. However, it's a good way of spreading because these plants produce a lot of fruit. Oriental Bittersweet chokes out native plants and creates tree fall hazards when they become very dense on trees. They also shade out native understory plants, which are really important for ecosystems to survive. So in order to remove them, you can pull the young plants right from the ground. You can cut the vine at the base near the ground and at the top, as tall as you can reach, or you can go up on a ladder and cut it, and that should kill it off. But you can also cut it at the bottom and paint the stump with herbicide to be sure that it doesn't resprout. Once the material is removed, you can create a brush pile if the plant is not in seed, or you can solarize off-site as it does reproduce with the seeds. So if it is in seed, it's really important to bag it up and take it off-site. Japanese barberry is another common invasive species that might be found in your yards. It has a woody stem with these thorns at each node. And the leaves are small, smooth-edged, and have this elongated oval shape, as you can see in the picture. And they turn this really pretty purple color in the fall. The Japanese barberry develops clusters of yellow flowers in May that hang from the stems, as you can also see in the photo. And then as the summer progresses into fall, they will turn into clusters of oval-shaped red berries that will overwinter. Japanese barberry outcompetes native shrubs and is not a very great food source for birds and other wildlife. They also are a breeding ground for deer ticks and white-footed mice that carry diseases and other ticks. So it's important to remove them. You can hand pull them with proper equipment. They do have thorns, so it's important to wear gloves. You can also cut them at the base or mow them down. You can also do foliar spray or cut stump herbicide treatments. Once the material is removed, you can create a brush pile if the plant is not in seed. You can burn it. The material can be chipped and composted, or you can solarize either on-site or off-site. I would say probably off-site because the thorns might be able to poke through the tarp when you lay it down, so it'd be best to cut it, remove it, take it off-site. Finally, we have burning bush. This is another common species that has been planted in gardens. It has a woody stem with these raised wings, as you can see in the photo, and it can grow up to 20 feet tall. The leaves grow alternate along the stems and are toothed and are about between 1 and 3 inches long. They're bright green in the summer and then turn this really pretty red color in the fall, which is why they're so popular. They also have these green flowers that develop into red oval fruit by midsummer. So they're a threat because they outcompete native species, especially in forest habitat. So it's important to remove them. Pulling small plants is an effective way. You can also cut branches twice a year for a number of years on larger plants to prevent it from going into seed. You can also do foliar sprays, basal bark applications, or cut stump herbicide treatments. Once you remove the branches or the material, you can create a brush pile, you can burn, you can chip and compost, or you can solarize. Solarization for this plant should be done off-site, as the plant can be really tall and it'd be difficult to put a tarp over the entire thing. So that is all I have for you today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out or visit our website. We have lots of information on these species that I talked about today. And if you have any questions regarding the removal or disposal, feel free to reach out. Thank you.